Good afternoon and welcome. I want to officially welcome you guys to the Middleton Chamber's Economic Development Update for the month of April. We are super excited to be talking about the Climate Action Plan today. I do want to just mention a few things as we get started here. You may have noticed that closed captioning was turned on the bottom of your screen. If that's a benefit, please feel free to leave that on. If it is something you'd like to hide, you can click the little arrow or click that button and hide those captions along the bottom. We would ask that you stay on mute during part of this conversation. We will have questions at the end, and also feel free to use the chat feature if you have questions that you don't want to forget. Feel free to type them in there and we'll be sure to address them as we go. We do ask if it's possible, turn your camera on. It's always nice to know that real people are out there. And I think that was it. So after today, you guys will get a copy of the recording as well as the slide deck for you to reference. So a huge thank you to our sponsors, which you can see listed here on the slide. We are very fortunate to have great partners within the Middleton Chamber to help us execute these programming events. So today I would like to introduce the team that's going to be speaking. We're joined by Dane County Executive Joe Parisi, Office of Energy and Climate Change Director Kathy Kuntz, and One Community Bank Market President Dan Carey. These speakers are going to talk about Dane County's Climate Action Plan with a special focus on programs that help local businesses benefit from our region's transition to clean energy future. It's my pleasure to turn this presentation over to them.
Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate you allowing us to come and speak with you for a few minutes today. I'm really excited to be able to talk about what we're doing in county government and county-wide, and Kathy will get into some more of the plan, but to also bring forth some real practical information for you from Dan. And I really appreciate his being here today and his involvement in One Community Bank's commitment to the community and doing good things. So, I think I'll start just with kind of the broad, the discussion around climate change has evolved very quickly over the past couple of years. It wasn't long ago that it was considered kind of a controversial issue. Well, the argument is really over. The question now isn't, is climate change impacting us? It's how is it impacting us and how quickly is it going to impact us? And what we're seeing actually is the modeling that shows us what is going to be happening has been wrong in one sense, is in that the impacts are happening sooner than predicted in many cases. So, we saw that certainly in the Middleton Cross Plains area 3 summers ago with the flooding that occurred, that, it really impacted every area of life. It impacted residents, it impacted businesses, it impacted recreation, and the cost has been tremendous just from that one incident. And when we look at climate change modeling and how it will impact us locally, which is what we did in Dane County in partnership with the University of Wisconsin, is that the modeling shows we will have warmer and wetter weather, basically. A lot of caveats when that happens, where it happens. But it's really what we've been seeing the last few summers. And again, what we really saw 3 summers ago, not only are we getting more frequent rain events, but we're getting heavier rain events with a lot more rain all at once. And so while we focus on adaptation, which is very important because there's some change that we can't prevent, we're also focused on prevention. And the good news in the realm of prevention is that there's a lot we can do and are doing locally. And there's still a lot of relatively low-hanging fruit. And we no longer have to decide between, gosh, do I want to do the right thing for the environment or for my bottom line, because the two are intertwined now. Particularly when we look at energy efficiency, when we look at renewables like solar, for example, the cost has come down so dramatically for those renewables that we see the utilities investing in utility scale projects because it's cheaper than coal. So we're really at a critical stage in this journey, but at a very exciting stage. So what we've done in Dane County government over the past few years is looked at our utilities, looked at our energy consumption. We have numerous facilities across the county, and we've invested millions of dollars in the last, say, 6-8 years, first of all, into energy efficiency, because that's the lowest hanging fruit with the largest ROI. Not only retrofitting, but looking as we construct new facilities how can we build that in up front and construct them as environmentally efficient and energy efficient as possible? Because in the long run, especially when you can deal with new construction, you save money. And in county governments, realm, just like in the business world, those annual operating expenses are what's really a challenge. And for us, we have limits to how much we can levy in taxes for operating funds. So if we can build in those savings ahead of time, that frees up that money for tax savings or other funding services that we need. So we've invested in energy efficiency, and then we assessed all of our facilities for their ability to accept renewable energy, namely solar. And to date, we have 16 solar projects that we've implemented. You may have seen on the news this week, we announced our renewable RV park that we have out at the Lake Farm Park. It's really exciting. We have, a beautiful facility there. There's an outbuilding, there's a shower, there's a facility that has offices and banquet and meeting space. And then there are the RVs that plug in. When you combine all the facilities there, it's probably, 15 to 20 houses worth of electricity. And we just announced we're offsetting 90% of that electricity with solar power. And the investment, and we don't even get to take advantage of tax credits like businesses do. And even without getting the tax credits that are available, our ROI there will be, and this is a facility that will be there forever, will be 15 years and is completely paid off. And that's on a system that will last a minimum of 30 years. So you can look at it as, going 15 years and then no more energy bills, or look at it for the next 30 years, we get 50% off our energy bills. And again, for businesses, it would cost even less. So we've done that. Perhaps our most exciting project was a partnership with MG&E out at our airport, where we built a 9 megawatt, which is about 36 or 37,000 solar panels, solar field. And we did this in partnership with MG&E. And this is another example of how this makes financial sense. We have the land at the airport. We're leasing it to MG&E at market rate. They constructed the solar field. They paid for everything up front. We promised to purchase that electricity because we could use it all in county government. It will offset 40% of our electric use. And because of the lower cost of solar and them knowing that they have a guaranteed buyer, the math worked out for them and it worked for us. And in the first year of operations, that initiative alone will save county taxpayers $140,000 on our electric bill. So it just makes sense for the environment. It makes sense for the bottom line. And it also, for, when we're looking at local economic development, it provides jobs. Because when we're just purchasing that electricity that's generated from coal that's mined in another state and burned in a power plant outside of Dane County, there are no Dane County jobs associated with that. But when we look at the past year, when companies were shedding jobs because of COVID, we were employing hundreds of people between the construction of the facility out at the airport and other facilities like the Lake Farm project that we announced this week, that we cut the ribbon on. We employed laborers, electricians, installers. So those dollars, it's like shopping local, only shopping local for your electricity and your energy needs. Those dollars stay in the local community. So again, we're really excited about where we're at with this. One other interesting project that we do is, we have a landfill in Dane County. We built a plant that extracts the methane gas that's produced at our landfill. And methane gas is a very powerful greenhouse gas. I think it's something like 37 times more powerful than CO2 in the atmosphere. We extract that gas, we clean it and compress it, and we do two things with it. We run about half of our county highway department vehicles on that. So those big orange snowplows you see, more and more of those as they turn over are being converted to run on bio-compressed natural gas, which is the cleanest burning transportation fuel. And it also costs us about $1.40 a gallon to pay for it. And so with the remainder, which is a lot because we create a lot of it, we sell that into the interstate natural gas pipeline, and it's purchased by a local Wisconsin company, Quick Trip, which we're all familiar with. And they dispense compressed natural gas, and much of it is bio-CNG from our plants. And we also utilize the gas that's produced at our manure digesters that are projects we have to help clean up our lakes because they create methane gas. And now that's being cleaned and compressed and taken to our facility and sold through that facility. So that helps clean up our lakes, helps make the manure digesters financially viable, and cuts down on greenhouse gases. So we're really proud of and really excited about all the work that we're doing in our community, in local government. And we decided we wanted to expand that work throughout the community because we know there's so many opportunities. So a couple of years ago, we invited folks in from business, the utilities, environmental organizations, the university, and we created a climate action council, we called it. And they came up with the project that Kathy's going to talk a little bit about today, our Dane County Climate Action Plan, which shows people throughout the community how we can work together to reduce greenhouse gases and at the same time improve so many other challenges in our community. So we're really excited because, sometimes these problems seem so big and so far away. We think, what can we do about climate change? Like many of you, I'm a dad and I think about the future of my kids and what this planet's going to look like and what opportunities they're going to have. And it can be overwhelming, but there is so much we can do. And so that's why we're really excited to be here. Kathy will give you an overview, and having Dan here is really great because he's going to talk to you about opportunities to impact your business and the planet at the same time, and save dollars and reduce greenhouse gas emissions and show the community, because we all know the community wants to work with businesses that are environmentally responsible, and demonstrate to the community how much all of our local businesses care about the environment too. So thanks again for having us. As you can probably tell, I'm really excited to be here. We love doing these presentations, and there's great momentum in Dane County right now for getting a lot of good work done. So I think I'll turn it over to Kathy, and then Dan will talk, and then we'll all be available for questions. So thank you.
Terrific, thanks. So again, I'm Kathy Kuntz with the Dane County Office of Energy and Climate Change, and I'm going to give you a little bit more detail about our climate action plan and then turn it over to Dan. So as the executive said, he created a council on climate change to work with our office to create the plan. And that was a really diverse group of stakeholders: local governments, businesses, farmers, utilities, university researchers, environmental advocates coming together to say, what can we get done and how can we do it in a way that benefits everyone? When you do a plan like this, one of the most important things to understand is where you're starting. So this is a chart of our emissions where we're starting. We're starting with our 2016 emissions. This is a county-wide, economy-wide plan. So in 2016, all of us together in Dane County produced about 7.5 million metric tons of carbon equivalent. And the pie chart gives you a sense of how that breaks down. So the biggest chunk of our emissions comes from our current electric grid, which in Wisconsin, a lot of our electricity comes from burning fossil fuels. So that grid is kind of emissions heavy right now. These two yellowish pie pieces here that are labeled residential and commercial, that's the natural gas we burn in our buildings to heat space and water. So about half of the emissions in Dane County come from the built environment. And then more than half of the remainder are the transportation sector. And then it's kind of everything else. So that sort of gives you a sense of scale when we're thinking about a climate action plan. What are the things we're focusing on? To create the plan, our office assembled a number of working groups of subject matter experts, by about a dozen groups. And those groups worked with the council to develop what are about 110 recommendations in the end in the climate action plan. I'm not going to go through all 110 recommendations. I'm going to give you a framework for thinking about this. So most of the recommendations are about reducing emissions, and they fall into three broad categories. The first is about eliminating waste. So certainly this is about energy efficiency, but it's also about food waste and wasted water and other resources, because anytime we take a resource and move it around and then waste it, those emissions we didn't need to have emitted. So that's the first piece, really embracing efficiency. Then we want to transition to clean energy sources. So we want to get our electricity from solar and wind. We want that renewable natural gas from the landfill and manure digester. And then the final piece is really using that clean energy. So increasingly, you'll see an emphasis on us electrifying buildings, making all electric buildings. And similarly on vehicles, we'll be transitioning from petroleum fuels to electric and RNG vehicles over time. All of that reduces our emissions. We also have an opportunity in Dane County to increase natural carbon sequestration in plants and soils. And the good news is our county land and water resources team has been working on this for a long time. They've been working on these issues to improve water quality and to reduce flooding impacts, but it turns out there are carbon benefits too. When we plant more trees, when we do continuous cover agriculture, all of that helps us store more carbon in the plants and soils. So that's a piece of what we want to see expanded too. When we do all of these things, we have a plan. We worked with climate scientists on this. Our plan can cut in half countywide emissions by 2030. That's really significant. You're going to hear more about that number in the coming days. I read this morning that all the pundits think the president is going to say that the national goal will be to cut emissions in half by 2030. And probably you'll hear one or more pundits say that's not possible. I want you to remember Dane County has a plan with very specific actions on how we're going to do that. So not only it is ambitious, I will give you, but it is totally possible. It is though a plan. And you know, when you listen to the county exec talk, it's pretty clear he likes to see things get done. So the plan is just the beginning. You know, we're having conversations like this one to really engage people in the community, to make them aware that we have a plan, that we want them to be part of that plan, and that together we can create a stronger Dane County. A key function for my office is to make it easy for individuals and businesses and other entities in the county to reduce their emissions. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute, but that's a core thing that I do. Another really important thing for me to do is to celebrate the leadership. You know, we have so many entities in Dane County that are doing good work in this space, and we're really committed to showcasing that leadership. One of the ways we do that is through our Climate Champions program. We launched this last year, and we have a bunch of categories. We recognize folks for being really energy efficient. We're now going to recognize zero waste entities, people who are doing innovative things around employee commuting. There's lots of ways to get recognized as a climate champion. And our whole aim here is to give kind of shout outs to those local groups who are leading, to do a little snippet about what they're doing on our interactive climate champion map you can see there, so that others can learn from them, and so that the broader public knows about the leadership you're doing. So you can go to our website, which is daneclimateaction.org, to read more about climate champions. There's also, though, I want to point out a page on our site, what you can do, where we've got a bunch of resources for businesses talking about various ways to tackle, whether you're interested in renewable energy or improving your fleet. We've got resources. And when you look at those resources, one of the things we showcase is how you pay for it and the PACE program. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan from One Community Bank to talk about PACE.
Thank you very much, Kathy, and thank you all for joining today. I'm Dan Carey. I'm the market president with One Community Bank. Real quickly about our organization. So as we started the PACE participation with our bank back in 2018, you're probably familiar with the history of combining two organizations in Dane County to form One Community Bank over the last 12 months. That's McFarland State Bank and Oregon Community Bank. So as I tell folks that look on the PACE website of all the projects that have been financed between those two banks, obviously that's one community as we move forward. And the beauty of our organization moving forward is we not only continue to be dedicated to funding within the PACE market in moving the needle on sustainability in our county and Wisconsin wide, we now have more capacity to do it. So we maintain our presence as a local community bank with local leadership and ownership. So that's all very exciting about our future prospects within this particular program. So 2018, we got into it. We look forward to these opportunities to find some niche markets that maybe Other larger organizations would see as not a fit, and we try to find a way to say yes. So this was a perfect example of that, PACE financing. It's turned out to be a really good match for us. So I think, as Kathy, if you want to move on to the next slide, I think a lot of people are familiar with PACE as a concept, and we're talking commercial PACE. So to fund commercial properties, there is residential PACE. This is not a residential PACE program. The state of Wisconsin does not have a residential PACE program at this time. So we're talking commercial properties. And as you can see, it's a state statute that gets implemented county by county in terms of eligibility to utilize that program, because as the PACE financing is implemented on a property, there's a special charge financing recordable document that gets recorded against that property in that county. So as you can see, and honestly, this map, there's some updates since this map was last put together, but over very close to half of the counties, and certainly some of the familiar ones we all operate in, our PACE eligible and have adopted the PACE program. So Kathy, if you move to the next slide, I'll go quickly through what PACE financing is, although I do think there's a familiarity with it. Basically, anything that you want to invest in that focuses on energy conservation, and I'll even add environmental cleanup, can be PACE eligible. So that's renewable energy, energy efficiencies, water conservations. A lot of eligible improvements will fit under that umbrella. Kathy, if you go to the next slide, you will see some examples of that. And for the most part, it's self-explanatory. Chances are, if you deem it as a viable improvement to make to your building to fund energy efficiencies, it's going to qualify for PACE. And additionally, you're probably going to find that a lot of the soft ancillary costs behind those improvements also qualify for PACE. As Joe alluded to earlier, as we think about energy efficient improvements, now you check a lot of boxes, whereas in the past, perhaps somebody would be interested in it, a business owner would be interested in it as a social, environmental friendly thing to do, the right thing to do. Well, now, not only do you get that impact, you get a positive future cash flow. So from an economic investment standpoint, it also makes sense, and it makes a lot of sense in certain cases. And then with the PACE financing program, I'll add one more on top of that. You have no upfront cash investment. So if you can present that opportunity to a property owner, it's really hard to say no to that anymore, because you check virtually every box one would consider when making that decision. Kathy, you can move on to the next slide from here. And here you see all of the different property types. As you can see, there are non-for-profit facilities. So as we talk about making improvements to churches or organization building headquarters, those can be big time savings for non-for-profits. So that's an area I see a lot of potential growth. Hospitality has been a big one when you think about the amount of energy that goes into a building like that. And all of the property types you see. Agriculture is another one that we've seen. And honestly, as you'll find when we go through, we've really checked when you look at all of the different examples of PACE financing. I feel like we've been involved in a wide variety of them. So we've got experience to speak to those. Next slide. This goes into some of the details on how would we structure some of these PACE financing loans and what you can expect. So as I already spoke to, it's 100% financing. It does get recorded on the property. So it's different from an actual mortgage that you may record if you buy a house or a property. This is a tax charge. And the beauty of that is it's non-recourse. So it's really against the property, not the individual behind it. Now, of course, when you own the property at that time, you are the responsible party to make those payments and to apply for the PACE loans. However, what becomes attractive about it as you look at different improvements you can make and try to analyze how long you may be in a property and if it makes sense. So for instance, I may look at solar, but I might be growing as a business and I'm worried that I'll make this investment and in 2 to 3 years, I'm going to be looking for a new building. Well, that's fine. PACE is actually transferable to the new owners upon sale. So as we talk about some of the ins and outs of the program, that's what I like to point out a lot of the times, because I feel that's what's held some businesses back from making that investment. How do I justify to the new owner what that new value is that I just put into a brand new solar system and solar panels on my building? Well, now it's really easy, because they can incur that investment and they'll incur said cost savings over the life of those improvements. So I think that's one very important feature to keep in mind as you assess the viability of making those improvements, and one of the reasons to make the improvements now versus wait. If we go on to the next slide, and you'll see long-term financing is another positive attribute of the program. Fixed rates 20 to 30 years that you can get through the PACE financing structure. And what you'll find, our bank, a lot of the competitors we have in this market are national capital providers that do PACE across many different states. And that's great. You know, it's helpful to have that market be open. But I think our success has been attributed to the fact that we're a community bank and we base our business on relationships. And so we can analyze everyone's individual scenario and really customize how we structure the PACE loan versus more of a black and white approach to here's how it's going to look, here's how you have to fund the improvements, and here's when the repayment starts. And we'll get into some of the advantages of our ability to modify those as we go forward. One key point, loan size, really there's no limit in terms of what are realistic project sizes. As you see here, 100,000 to 20 million, that's just a very broad range. I will say that we've funded deals as low as 100,000, and we funded deals for our situation up to, I think, 5 or 6 million. And so we could certainly go higher if it made sense to do so. If you get over the 250,000 mark, which, you know, if you're looking at a commercial solar project, depending on the size, probably not going to be above that. You do have to get a savings guarantee, and I won't go into too much detail on that other than say it can add some cost to the PACE financing. But if you're under 250,000, which many of relevant projects would be when you involve solar as an example, you don't have to incur that cost. So it makes the viability of the program even more enhanced. And much of your assessment in terms of an energy assessment is simply done through the solar company that provides you the projected payback and cost savings from that. Kathy, you can move on to the next slide after that. And this gets us into just a very broad example. And this is where I'll go into a little bit of the structure. And so let's take $100,000 roughly solar project. Many times what you're going to have in a solar project when you look at how you want to structure the financing is I'm going to have a construction period. So day one in this case would be July 31st back in 2019. So I will say that there's some updates to this with what we've done now. You may get a little bit more term in terms of 20 years, and your interest rate could be a little bit lower now in the current environment. But we'll use this example. You want to, obviously you have a need to fund that project. And many times in solar, in particular, you're going to have some different benefits that come along after the project's installed. So I may have some grants, I may have some tax credits, and ideally I would like to set that repayment up once all of those incentives have been applied to my initial investment, because ideally I wanted to get into a cash flow positive situation where my energy cost savings annually actually make my loan payment and then some. That goes back to the positive future cash flow that we talked about as an advantage in the current environment. So what we may do is we may say, okay, and I'm going to use 125,000 as an example. We'd start with 125, and we give you an interest only structure that maybe even defers even making the payment on the interest until you're ready to go into repayment. We apply all of those incentives and you get an end result of a $100,000 loan when it finally goes into repayment. What we have the ability to do that a lot of other capital providers won't do is defer that payment and give you that kind of construction period, I'll call, for 12 to 24 months to let all of those paybacks come into place, those larger ones, so we can get you into a cash flow positive situation. And that's ideally what an owner wants, because it goes back to it's good for the earth, it's good future cash flow, and I have no out-of-pocket costs up front. And that's what we can set you up with, financing it through our program. Kathy, you can move to the next slide. This is just kind of gives an example of how commercial pace, that's C-PACE, how fast it's starting to pick up and ramp up. So this goes through 19. I'm here to tell you specifically in Wisconsin, 2020 and 21, even now as we're starting to see our pipeline, that's just going to continue to go up and up. So commercial pace has clearly been a financing resource that many property owners have leaned in on and continues to pick up momentum. And that obviously will correlate with just the energy efficiency improvements that are being made now with the cost savings and the cost viability going forward. Couple other points just to wrap up my presentation, and we'll go into questions if there are any. We talked about it being transferable. That becomes a very big deal, I think, when you think about trying to urge someone to go into a project and having that confidence that if they sell the property, it's still worth their investment now. The other thing is PACE financing is retroactive as well. So you may have made a solar improvement 12 months ago and you're thinking, man, I wish I would have taken advantage of this because this is a great program. It's actually retroactive up to 36 months following the completion of the improvement. So keep that in mind as you've looked at potentially past projects that would qualify in the future. Or you may combine, and we've done this in certain situations. Kathy, if you go to the next slide, I think we're to the point where there we go. We're getting into some of our examples where Uniroyal Manufacturing, this is a great example. This is a manufacturing plant in Stoughton, and obviously use a lot of energy within that industry. So this is a company that has looked hard at solar, but also in the last 24 months leading up to that, invested in LED lighting. So what we were able to take advantage of is their current need of roof enhancement, and also build in the LED lighting that they had completed over the past 2 years, and actually get them cash back in their pockets and build that into a PACE loan. Some other cool projects you see on here. Hotels are a big one, as I spoke earlier. Part of the reason hotels are, and this goes for a lot of real estate, is because it's a tax. There is the ability to potentially pass on some of those energy cost savings as part of a room tax or through a net lease structure. So you can see plenty of new in hotels, you can either do existing renovation or you can do brand new construction, and that goes for any property type. Basically, the assessment on brand new construction, if it's like the building envelope and the HVAC and the water, is they measure it against your base building code requirements. And if you're going above and beyond that, those improvements then can be deemed PACE eligible improvements. So you see mixed use on the edge. That's an apartment / commercial project downtown in Madison. A Waterloo Technology Center was a great example. That was a major renovation, energy efficiency enhancement of an office building in Waterloo. So really some wide variety of projects that we've been proud to take part in. Our bank has financed over 25% of all PACE loans in Wisconsin, which is now up to 50 million, I think, based off of the most recent assessment. So we've been excited about the program. We're excited to continue in the program, and we see a lot of future opportunity. Kathy, I think that basically goes into the end of the slides. This is just a comment from Sean Swenson. The North Central Group, a hotel development company based out of Middleton, has been very active implementing energy cost savings into their hotel projects and then utilizing PACE to fund some of that as well. So a very well-known name there that's had a great experience. And then I'll just wrap up with, here at One Community Bank, myself, I'm obviously a contact. Mark McMurdy, who's one of our other vice presidents of commercial lending. Mark is also very knowledgeable in this program and will be another resource as we continue to branch out and have more of these conversations going forward. So there's both of our contact information, and please always feel free to proactively reach out to one of us if you have any questions or if you have any potential projects coming up.
Terrific. Thanks, Dan. I've got my contact information there too. I'm going to stop sharing now so that we can see people to have Q&A. And you know, we were talking about county efforts. One of the things we didn't say very much about, but is a big thing for us at the county, is collaborating with local governments. And so the first person I want to call on in our Q&A is Kelly Hilliard at the City of Middleton, just to add her 2 cents to what we've been talking about, because we work very closely with Kelly.
Hello all, thanks for having me. I will be brief. I'm the city's sustainability coordinator and I started about 1.5 years ago. And as you may know, the city adopted clean energy resolution in 2018 that includes 100% renewable energy goals for both city operations, but also for the community, the whole community wide by 2050. There's benchmarks along the way until 2050, but there are stringent goals by that point. And our school district also recently adopted a major sustainability resolution that also sets 100% renewable energy goals by 2035, even sooner. And they also included zero waste goals. So right now, as a city, due to MG&E's shared solar array program, which the city purchased shares from out at our municipal Middleton Airport, and also due to our energy efficiency efforts and 3 solar installations that we're putting on city government buildings this summer, we'll be at 50% renewable solar energy for our electricity by the end of the summer, hopefully. And our next steps will be to transition our fleet, our city fleet, to electric vehicles and hybrid police patrol cars, and also streetlight LED transition. Streetlights use a lot of energy. And the next thing we're doing this year also is putting battery storage at our police department for resiliency and power backup and essentially microgrid technology, which will be a new thing for the city. So we based a lot of our efforts for this off of an energy plan that was produced from a state planning grant. And we did that in collaboration with 6 other Dane County municipalities. Also this last year, one thing that we've done during COVID, which wasn't as public facing in the process, was we rewrote our 20-year comprehensive plan for the city. So I really encourage you, if you haven't read through that, to take a look. There's some community-wide energy goals and things that the business district can work, the business community can work with the city on around climate change and energy and sustainability in general. We're also rewriting our sustainability plan right now. So just a couple points I'd like to make about ways that the Sustainability Committee and the city would really like to collaborate with the business community. We would love to encourage some PACE projects in our city and help support that in any way, or provide resources or information you need to move that forward. That's a great thing, as you've just heard explained. And then we'd also really like to celebrate you when you do things like energy efficiency projects or renewable energy, much like the Dane County Climate Champion program has to celebrate. The city would also like to celebrate the businesses that really are the stewards in our community and provide really visual examples for residents as well, and other businesses in other cities. And due to COVID, we didn't have as much of a public facing outreach this past year, but what we're looking to do is develop a monthly series of talks about how the community can actively engage in climate change mitigation for our climate emergency, and how the business community can work together. And lastly, I would say we'd really love to formalize some groups through the chamber that work on energy issues with the business community, things like voluntary benchmarking programs, renewable energy, and also some interests on our committee and in our high school students is single-use plastic reduction, as well as salt reduction through water softener audits and road salts that you might use in your parking lots. So those are some things that we have on our horizon and ways we'd love to collaborate, but please do reach out with any ideas or questions. And I really hope to build more relationships with the business community over the next year as things open up more and COVID recovery begins to happen. So thanks so much for letting me speak a bit, Kathy.
Oh, definitely. Lots of, you can tell we work closely. There are lots of things in tandem there. So what other questions do folks have for any of us?
Could I pose a quick one to Dan? And thank you, Kelly. Yeah, the City of Middleton. This is contagious. Like I said, the momentum is really exciting. What's going on here, Dan? excuse me if you mentioned this, you may have, and I missed it, I apologize if I did, but could you speak briefly, kind of a two-part question about the mechanism, the payment mechanism, since this is a tax, how that might differ than a regular loan? Is it part of the quarterly tax bill, et cetera? And then could you give an example of kind of the difference between, if there's such a thing as an average difference between that payment and the savings? So kind of what does that positive cash flow look like? Is that $50 a month? Is that $300 a month? Obviously depends on the project, but could you touch on those two questions briefly?
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. Good questions on the payment mechanism. So it is a tax assessment per se. However, you do get billed through Slipstream, who's a servicing agent for the PACE Wisconsin program. So it does happen that we time up the payment due dates with the tax payment due dates. So for instance, and we don't do the quarterly, so you can either choose semi-annually or annually. So typically January 31st, July 31st of every year, you'll get your payment, your billing notice from Slipstream in the mail. Now, if you were to ever not make the payment, then there's the ability to place that delinquent payment as a special assessment on the tax bill. So that's where it would become a tax if you didn't make it, which, as we know, the priority of taxes and mortgages, if you have a delinquent tax, it actually supersedes your mortgage position. So that's the what got the bank comfortable with the fact that it's non-recourse, is you've got that enhanced lien position. Now, with that being said, you can't accelerate the default of the entire PACE loan. So if I have a $1 million PACE loan and I have a $100,000 annual payment, it's probably less than that, but we'll use that as an example, and it goes delinquent, I can only go after the $100,000 delinquent amount, not the entire $1 million face amount of the PACE loan. So that actually helps the mortgage lender get comfortable with the fact that that goes in front of their mortgage. Because one piece I don't even know if I touched on is you do need mortgage lender consent to place your PACE tax assessment because of that lien position. And then your second part of the question there, Joe, as it pertains to the cost savings, that is a moving target. As you alluded to with the improvement, I will say with solar in particular, I found with some of the fast tracks of repayments, you're seeing different projects that are assessed for commercial solar that have a payback of 5 to 6 years, and in some cases even less, depending on what type of tax credits and grants are available. So if that's the case, I mean, your annual PACE payment might be 50% of your cost savings. It's just tremendous how fast those commercial solar project paybacks have become. And so, that's where it becomes no-brainers to pursue them.
Thank you.
As Kathy said, we would be glad to take any questions. If you feel comfortable taking yourself off of mute and ask it, or please feel free to drop it in the chat.
I was just curious if there's any movement afoot to try to extend PACE availability to residential projects. I'm guessing that if you went as far as like single family, the administration of that would become very challenging, but it seems like it could also be a great resource for homeowners who are looking to do efficiency projects.
Yeah, that is a good question, because that's really picked up a lot lately that I've noticed is the residential solar market. So the challenge with that is going back to that lender consent. The majority of single family homes are financed through secondary market lending, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and those government agencies just have not, which is ironic because PACE was a government program, that it was started I think back in 2012 as a energy efficiency, way to move that needle forward. But the Fannie and Freddie have not been accepted of allowing those to go in front, and therefore it's tough to get momentum in the residential PACE market. I will say, just in general, with where property values have gone, there's a good chance with the leverage point you can get on a single family home through a home equity line of credit that can become sometimes your best route to finance those smaller residential solar projects. Just because you typically see the ability to get 90% loan to value up to that amount on a home equity line of credit, and some pretty attractive interest rates right now too. So that's usually where I direct the residential solar market.
So Dan, it sounds like there's not a lot of resistance among commercial lenders, that hasn't become a stumbling block. We've
actually had a lot of success with that. And I think part of the reason we have success with it is because we know a lot of the banks in the area, and although we compete, I think everyone's appreciative of how they operate, how each other operate. And we have those relationships where we can explain the program. And so we've had a lot of success with it. I would say if you run into a situation where it's not deemed as positive of a future cash flow enhancement to a property, and it's highly leveraged, and it's with maybe a larger regional financial institution, you may have some struggles. But for the most part, I think the community banks do a good job of partnering on a lot of the projects in the area. And so that's kept the market pretty liquid.
Well, when I hear the numbers that you throw around about how much these cost, again, I keep coming back to thinking about where those dollars would be going and where they're going because of this, which is right back in the community. It's just such a great economic development tool in and of itself, in addition to all the cost savings and carbon savings.
Absolutely. And keeping it locally financed as well, I think, and again, the national capital providers have opened up and kind of have kept the market competitive. But I will say we are the natural sales force out there promoting the program as well. And so that's what, when we were approached back in 2018, the folks from Pace, Wisconsin really wanted to make it a locally financed program as well, knowing we had a lot of the relationships to spread the word. And there's other organizations that have become eligible Pace lenders. And so I think the word is spreading, and we'll continue to do so.
Great.
Well, we can stay on for a few more minutes if anyone has any questions. But again, I just want to thank everybody for taking time today to be part of this program, to Dane County Exec Joe Parisi, to Kathy, to Dan, to Kelly, who's doing amazing things over at the city. We really appreciate you guys being here, and to all of our members again. Kathy popped up here on the slide. I just want to point out a couple events that we have rounding out the month of April. You may have heard me in other events that we've had, that we really listened to our membership from our survey that we put out earlier this year and what you guys were hungry and after. So a lot of this programming for the rest of the month is surrounded by that, including tomorrow's presentation. So health and safety considerations for your business. So we have Dane County Public Health is joining us, as well as some HR consultants to, so public health is going to go through, what businesses need to consider as they're starting to bring back more employees, or maybe having everyone in the office full time. And then what the HR company is seeing in terms of comfort levels from employees and employers. So we're also going to do a session on remote engagement of your workforce. So a lot of people may stay at home, and how do you keep them engaged with your organization. And we round out with what I'm calling like the legal side of things. I don't know why I put it in quotes, but I did. But it's really, we have John Gardner from DeWitt joining us to talk about, what, from a legal standpoint, can employers mandate that their employees get a vaccination? And what if they don't? Or what kind of lawsuits or things or insurance claims could potentially come out of COVID as we returning back to work? Rights of the employee, what they can and can ask for in their workplace. So those are all available for registration on the website. Again, thank you to our sponsors, and a huge shout out to all of you guys for being with us today. Thank you.